Senate will come to order. Chaplain Dr. Back will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Eternal God, we're grateful for your mercies, renewed each day, and for your faithfulness every night. As the dew refreshes the earth morning by morning, let your Spirit restore the faith and energy of our lawmakers. Lord, give them the discernment to understand the challenges of our times and the wisdom to devise ways to meet them. Keep them open and alert to your providential leading as you guide them to a destination that will bring glory to your name. May the collective talents of our senators be mobilized in the awesome task of building a better nation and world. Make their hands ready to lift burdens and their hearts eager to respond in service to humanity. We pray in your great name. Amen.
Will you please join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each. Senator from Iowa.
I want to tell my colleagues and the public about a part of the big, beautiful bill that passed 2 weeks ago that isn't getting much attention. I've been a long-time supporter of health savings accounts. They encourage responsible utilization of healthcare services by offering lower cost insurance and greater flexibility of care. I'm proud to have led the charge in the early 2000s to make health saving accounts accessible and a stronger option for Americans. Today, would you believe it, over 30 million Americans have a health savings account with an average balance of more than $3,000. Senate Republicans, through the One Big Beautiful Bill, went a step further, strengthening health savings accounts. First, the bill allowed health saving accounts to work with direct primary care service arrangements. Direct primary care is a membership-based model of care that lets patients choose a primary care provider of their choice and gain access to a suite of care options without needing to go through an insurance company's red tape. Doctors and providers under this way also benefit since they can spend more time with the patient rather than completing unnecessary paperwork. When patients have access to timely and high-quality primary care, they have better health outcomes and live longer. Prior to the law change, there were rules preventing consumers from contributing to and using a health savings account for direct primary care. Direct primary care will also improve rural health care by expanding access to physicians and other health care providers, and also expanding access to telehealth to reach patients in a more timely fashion. We also allow individuals to have purchased who have purchased a catastrophic or bronze health plan on the federal marketplace to now contribute to and use a health savings account. In addition, this will improve access and competition on the federal marketplace, and that we all know is sorely needed. I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Hansell Brooks.
Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. President, yesterday marked 6 months since President Trump took office. And today is the 200th day of the Republican majority here in the United States Senate. And in that time, the Trump administration and Senate Republicans have been hard at work executing the mandate we received from the American people last November. We already have a number of accomplishments on the list. We got started by sending the Laken-Riley Act to President Trump's desk during the first week in office to keep criminal illegal immigrants off our streets. President Trump signed the HALT Fentanyl Act last Wednesday, which permanently classifies fentanyl analogs as the deadly drugs that they are. On Friday, he signed the Genius Act, a landmark bill to bring digital assets into the mainstream and secure U.S. leadership in financial innovation. And the first rescissions package in 3 decades is headed to the President for his signature. We passed measures to end 16 burdensome Biden-era regulations. We passed the Take It Down Act to combat non-consensual explicit images being shared online. And of course, 2 weeks ago, Mr. President, on the 4th of July, the President signed into law the big, beautiful bill to deliver permanent tax relief for the American people to make our country safer, stronger, and more prosperous. And Mr. President, we have additional bills coming down the pike. The Armed Services Committee under Chairman Wicker recently reported the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2026. And the Appropriations Committee under Chair Collins has reported out 4 bipartisan bills, which we will begin considering this week. I said last year that I was committed to bringing appropriations bills to the floor through regular order, and we are in the process of doing exactly that. Of course, any regular order consideration of appropriation bills is going to require cooperation from Democrats. And this week, we'll get a glimpse of where Democrats are on this issue. It was deeply disappointing to hear the Democrat leader threaten to shut down the government if Republicans dared to pass legislation to trim just 0.1% of the federal budget. But I'm hopeful that that is not the position of the Democrat Party. Time will tell. Mr. President, the Senate has also important work to do to confirm the President's nominees. We started out this year by confirming 21 of the President's cabinet nominees at the fastest pace in more than 2 decades. And we've kept up our focus on getting President Trump's team into place. We've now confirmed 96 civilian nominees, far outpacing where the Senate was at this point in the first Trump administration. And the only reason, frankly, Mr. President, that we're not moving faster is because of Democrats' historic, that is right, historic level of obstruction. Democrats have been forcing cloture votes for every civilian nominee, something that is without precedent. President Trump is the first president on record not to have a single civilian nominee go by unanimous consent or voice vote at this point in his presidency. The first president on record. Think about that, Mr. President. And Democrats are using this strategy even on non-controversial nominees. Almost a quarter of the nominees whose confirmation process Democrats have dragged out actually got more than 60 votes here on the Senate floor. Mr. President, the American people gave President Trump a mandate, and he deserves to have his team in place to execute that mandate for the American people. Democrats can continue to drag this process out, but Republicans are going to get these nominees confirmed. Mr. President, I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsop Brooks.
Mr. President,
The Democratic leader.
I ask unanimous consent. Are we in a quorum? I ask unanimous consent the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, today we got the news that the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, confirms Donald Trump's big, ugly betrayal is going to kick at least 10 million Americans off their health insurance and spike our national debt by another $3.4 trillion. In truth, the number of people who will lose health insurance could be much higher, as many as 16 million when you account for the cuts to ACA and other forms of insurance. This finalized independent analysis from the CBO confirms it. Republicans' signature bill is the ultimate betrayal of the American people. It betrays every single family who will lose health insurance. It betrays our financial future. It betrays our children and grandchildren who will pay for these billionaire tax breaks as the debt rises and rises. It betrays every family worried about paying for groceries, the mortgage, the rent, prescription drugs. All are going up because of Donald Trump and his administration. Every price of these is going up. And it betrays every rural community from benefits of good-paying energy jobs. Republicans' supposed signature bill betrays everyone outside of the billionaire class and the special interests. Now Republicans are going to spin the mother of all propaganda jobs to sell this ugly bill to the American people. But today's report reminds us of something. Facts are stubborn, and the facts are clear. The big ugly betrayal is a loser for the country and be a loser for the Republicans. And the Republicans can yak when they go back home. But when people lose their jobs, when people's bills go up, when they're paying more, when they're losing their health insurance, that's reality, and no amount of propaganda, no amount of going home and telling people how great this is will undo the actual damage that will be done to the American people. And we know that they will realize the Republicans have betrayed them. On appropriations. This week, the Senate's expected to take up the first set of appropriation bills for fiscal year 2026. On the substance, a number of the bills negotiated in committee make significant reversal of DOJ's horrible cuts. Of particular importance are the reversals these bills make to DOJ's cuts to veteran programs, which was so vicious and so mean and hurt so many veterans. And it also makes reversals on other important Democratic priorities. We'll see how Republican leaders plan to move forward with these bills and other bipartisan bills on the floor. Yet yesterday, the Republican leader gave an interview where he said he'd like to see more bipartisanship when it comes to appropriations. He said rightly that it takes cooperation from both sides to move things through the Senate in the appropriations bills. But frankly, the Republican leader is talking a bit out of both sides of his mouth. On the one hand, he talks about bipartisanship and wanting to see both parties come up with the appropriations process. On the other, he's putting on the floor rescission packages with cuts demanded by Donald Trump and Russell Vought that retract many of the bipartisan agreements, with the promise by Russell Vought of more to come. When Donald Trump and Russell Vought insist on rescissions, and an obedient Republican Congress goes along, even though many of them know how wrong it is, it makes the spending process totally partisan. So the leader's words and his actions are a complete contradiction. He can't have it both ways. Again, not 1 week ago, Republicans jammed a rescission pact out and says the appropriations process should be, quote, less bipartisan, unquote. Frankly, I don't want to hear Republicans grouse about Democrats if they're going to give people like Russell Vought a free pass to trash the good work that takes place in this chamber. And now, of course, there are reports that Donald Trump and Russell Vought want Congress to greenlight another recessions package in the near future. food funding, and good-paying energy jobs we've seen in our lifetimes. So Leader Thune says he wants to see bipartisanship. That's all well and good. But Leader Thune can't have it both ways. If Leader Thune wants to talk about bipartisanship, he should focus on keeping his side of the street clean first, because Donald Trump and Russell Vought have made clear they want to continue launching partisan broadsides that will inflict deep harm on the American people, raising costs, unleashing chaos, inviting even deeper corruption across the federal government. Now on Mr. Bove, Emil Bove. Last week, Senate Republicans on the Judiciary Committee reported out one of Donald Trump's worst judicial nominees yet, Emil Bove, and that's saying a lot because there are so many bad ones. Judiciary Republicans were so afraid to talk about Mr. Bove's nomination that, in fact, the Republican chair cut off debate time and refused to let all Democrats speak. And rather than being part of this farce, Judiciary Democrats, led by my friend, the ranking member, Senator Durbin, rightly walked out of the hearing. I commend my Democratic colleagues for standing up for the integrity of our courts and refusing to participate in a compromised committee process for a deeply compromised nominee. It's obvious why the Republicans were so eager to cut off debate. They know the arguments against Mr. Bove are telling and so unworthy of anyone nominated to a court of appeals or any judicial position in this government. Mr. Bove is the perfect example of the type of person Donald Trump wants on the bench. Political, aggressive, unprofessional, abusive, and ready and willing to put the Trump agenda over the rule of law. We all know what Donald Trump wants from judges, complete obeisance to whatever he wants, regardless of rule of law, regardless of precedent, regardless of the Constitution. And Mr. Bove has a long history of defending Donald Trump when he was his personal attorney. He defended the president when the president was accused of inciting the January 6th insurrection, mishandling classified documents, falsifying business records, and more. Well, what should that do when someone defends a president who's accused of very serious crimes? It should disqualify them for the bench, but the opposite occurs in the Trump administration. His defense of Trump's indefensible actions earned him a top spot at the DOJ, where he used his power to fire prosecutors who were working on criminal cases for the January 6th insurrectionists. That's right. Mr. Bove helped the rioters who assaulted law enforcement officers on January 6th get off without any charges. What is happening to this country? What is happening? And if that's not enough to disqualify him, one whistleblower testified that Mr. Bove repeatedly told DOJ lawyers to ignore court orders and even deliberately mislead judges. Mr. Bove encouraged officials not to tell judges the truth, the same sort of judges he is now nominated to serve alongside. How can someone who has such disregard for our judges and our courts be trusted on the bench? Mr. Bove's nomination previews the dark, ominous plan that Donald Trump and Republicans have for the federal judiciary. They want to fill our courts with partisan operatives who will protect and serve Donald Trump, not protect the rule of law. Experience doesn't matter. Judicial independence doesn't matter. Understanding the law and applying it without fear or favor doesn't matter at all. In fact, there's fear of Donald Trump among so many of the Republican nominees for judge and of so many of our Republican senators. For Donald Trump, the only thing that matters when it comes to judges is unyielding fealty to himself. We have never seen, never, such a disastrous mandate for our federal courts in all of American history. And if the Republicans proceed, the damage to our judiciary will be irreversible. Mr. Bove's nomination is an insult to every single qualified independent judge who has ever sat on the federal courts. He should never have been nominated. He should never have been reported out of committee, and he should never, never be confirmed by the Senate to such an important job. Finally, on NVIDIA and China, Donald Trump's trade war has created a mess for U.S. businesses. And now that he's rushing to clean up that mess, and he's getting played by Beijing. Last week, the administration handed President Xi and the Chinese government a major win, approving chipmaker NVIDIA to resume selling American H20 chips used to develop AI to China. When these chips were blocked, Americans breathed a sigh of relief. China would not get the basic tool to catch up and even surpass us on AI and so many other important technological advances. But not 4 months ago, for that reason, the administration blocked the sale of these chips. But now, typical of Donald Trump, there's no consistency, it's just what he feels is good for himself at the moment. They're making a costly, troubling U-turn. Flip-flops like this show weakness to the Chinese government, and that's the last thing we can afford. What's more, the chips are vital in the race to dominate AI. These H20 chips are among the best on the market and were critical for China's development of DeepSeek. We all wondered, how did China catch up with DeepSeek? Well, by using these chips. And now Donald Trump is greenlighting the sale of even more of these chips. If you're worried about allowing China to dominate in AI with all the troubling prospects of that domination, then this reversal from the administration is a huge step towards enabling that Chinese dominance. Every chip Donald Trump allows NVIDIA to sell to Chinese competitors is one more boost to Beijing in the race for AI dominance. But the administration's capitulation keeps going. As part of trade talks with Beijing, they're also undermining export controls of U.S. technologies deemed to be critical for our national security. This sends an unmistakable message to adversaries around the world. America's national security is open to negotiation under Donald Trump's government. The administration should reverse its original decision in April to block the sale of these chips to the Chinese government. Donald Trump should stop giving the Chinese government leverage in the race for the technologies of the future. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Democratic Whip.
Mr. President, last week both the House and the Senate voted to pass what's known as a rescission bill. That's a term which a lot of people aren't familiar with. And what it basically means is Congress appropriates money, the President signs that appropriation request into law, and it is the policy which is supposed to guide, under the Constitution, the President of the United States in the activity of the executive branch. This is the ordinary course of events. However, there may come a time when a president decides that we don't need this expenditure, even though it's been approved and it's the law. And he then goes through the rescinding of his decision to spend the money. It's called a rescission bill. And in this case, the Trump administration came to Congress and said, $9 billion that you appropriated and directed me to spend, I don't want to spend. I want your permission not to spend it. $9 billion. And that's what we voted on, and the House voted on last week. What was in this bill? There were primarily two major elements. One element was foreign aid, humanitarian assistance around the world, paid for by the United States. The other element was public broadcasting, national public radio, for example. $8 billion was taken out of foreign aid. $1 billion was taken away from public broadcasting. Close vote in the Senate. 2 Republicans joined the Democrats in opposing it, but there were enough Republicans to support it that it passed, barely passed. The Senate was sent back to the House. After some turmoil in the House, the decision was made to also pass the rescission bill. I thought this was a particularly important bill. I've cast, as a member of the Senate, honored to represent the state of Illinois, I've cast over 9,000 votes. The presiding officer from Utah is new to the Senate. It'll take him a few years to catch me, and I'm sure he will. But 9,000 votes in a period of time, how many do you actually remember? A handful. This vote last week was one of those votes. Why will I remember this? Because non-governmental organizations, charities, humanitarian aid groups around the world have told us that taking $8 billion out of foreign aid, humanitarian assistance, is going to cost us in terms of lives. Denying people food, clean water to drink, and medicine and the basics of life in the poorest places on earth will cost us lives. The original bill eliminated a program called PEPFAR. PEPFAR was created by a Republican president, George W. Bush. He rallied our government, Democrats and Republicans, to lead a national and international effort to stop HIV/AIDS. For example, if a mother was pregnant again and had HIV, the transmission of that disease to the baby was unfortunately very common. We started finding ways to stop it from happening. It's been many years since George W. Bush was president, but they estimate that we've saved 25 million lives with this PEPFAR program. I'm a loyal Democrat, proud of it, but happy to vote with the Republicans and George W. Bush on their program. That program was going to be eliminated by this bill that was considered. It was taken out at the last minute. That's the type of thing that was at stake in that vote. That decision by the Senate and the House, signed by President Trump over the weekend, is going to cost human lives in the poorest places on earth. I think that's a tragedy. I've been to some of those places. I made a point of going to see it and to see our programs. I remember a dusty village in India where the children were gathered around for what they called lunch. American kids would not have touched what they were being given to eat. They were basically dough balls. They were grains from the United States that was bonded together, and they ate these dough balls gleefully, happily, anxiously. But before they took the first bite, they stopped and said a prayer. And I asked the local people who were leading this effort, what did they say in the prayer? They said, thank you to the United States of America for the food that they were going to eat that day. They knew that was the case because it was printed on the bags, a gift to the people of America. Those programs are going to be eliminated now because of that vote last week. But there was another part of it, too, that struck me as really painful. That was the decision to eliminate the federal support for public broadcasting, national public radio, and public television. I'm a fan, and I've been a fan in a long time, so I'll confess my prejudice. But I'm also from downstate Illinois. That's a part of the state outside Chicago where the small towns and the rural areas are located. And I know what public broadcasting means to those areas. I heard firsthand an example of what it means. A lady named Heather Norman, who is with Public Broadcasting Coalition in Illinois, joined me in a press conference on Friday in front of the public radio station in the city of Chicago. And I asked her to tell me and the press that had gathered an example of why public radio was different than the other radio stations, why it was important. She gave me a very classic example. She works at the public radio station in Macomb, Illinois. Macomb is a downstate community on the western side of our state, a more sparsely populated area than people visualize when you say Chicago and Illinois. In Macomb, Illinois is Western Illinois University. Thousands of students from all around the state and the area attend college there. A year ago, there was an active shooter in the community. They learned about it through the police notifying the radio station, and they started broadcasting to the people of Macomb to stay in their homes, to shelter in place. Don't go outside until we control the situation. We'll wait for the police signal. Well, there was a lot at stake. We've seen a lot of our campuses and universities where deranged people take a gun and kill innocent students right and left, and we didn't want that to happen again. And so the public broadcasting station, the NPR station, kept the broadcast going all day long to notify the people of Macomb and that McDonough County area of the danger and to warn them to stay home. You say to yourself, well, I'll bet the other radio stations did too. They didn't. Why didn't they do it? Because the 4 other radio stations are recordings. There's no live person at those radio stations, just equipment. So they're playing their music and whatever programming they wish, but they couldn't send out local news because there was no one there to send it. It was a public broadcasting station, the public radio station that kept the people of Macomb and McDonough County safe. So to say that you can eliminate that station and it won't make any difference, whether the warning is about an active shooter, about a tornado, a flood, a flash fire, public broadcasting is there on the scene, doing their job day in and day out. Now, what's going to happen with this decision by the Trump administration to eliminate federal support for these stations? I don't know. I asked Heather. She said there are probably 2 stations in our state, at least 2, that'll go out of business. They depend so much on the help from Washington. That's a loss. Whether you're conservative or liberal, MAGA or progressive, whatever you want to call yourself, how could you want an America with less information, fewer choices for sources of that information? The strength of our democracy is the fact that the American people have access to good, credible information and make up their own minds. They don't wait to be told, they make up their own minds. That's the key to the core of democracy. And we attacked it last week when we eliminated support for public broadcasting. I don't know what's going to happen next. A lot of people have to think about this. And I've said to the people who govern public broadcasting and public television, public radio, you'll have to think of a plan B, because this president wants to put you out of business. You can't do what some law firms have done that he got mad at. He got mad at the law firms and threatened to cut off their federal business. What did they do? They sued for peace immediately. They said, what can we do? Can we give you thousands and maybe hundreds of thousands of free legal services? When that intimidation is in place, some of them turn to that as an alternative. But a public broadcasting station cannot do that and maintain its credibility. It can't go hat in hand, bended knee to this administration or any administration and maintain its credibility when it comes to news. So they have a terrible challenge that they face. I want to help them find a solution. I think America would be poorer and less free and less information available to people in our country if we allow this to go forward. Mr. President, on a separate issue, I want to say a word about some nominations that are pending before the Senate this week. As the ranking Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee, I pay closer attention than some when it comes to the nominees who are suggested for federal positions on the courts. These are positions that are lifetime positions. You take a person and you say, we entrust you with this responsibility and authority for as long as you live. As long as you live. So it isn't a question of 2 years or 4 years and replacing someone if they aren't up to the job. We've got to look for people that we can trust in the long haul. The Senate will soon vote on the confirmations of Joshua Devine to serve as judge on the Eastern and Western Districts of Missouri and Judge Christian Stevens to serve on the Eastern District. I'm concerned about these two nominees. Mr. Devine is 34 years old. He received his law degree only 9 years ago. In addition to lack of experience, Mr. Devine has taken some extreme positions on issues that are important to people across the United States, such as reproductive rights and ballot access. Mr. Devine, if you can believe this, in this day and age, 2025, has argued in favor of literacy tests at the ballot box. Let me say that again. He's argued in favor of literacy tests at the ballot box. He states, quote, individuals who aren't informed about issues or platforms have no business voting. The fact that we are even considering his nomination under this circumstance is shocking. Literacy tests have been tried in America. They are a racist relic from the Jim Crow era that were used to prevent immigrants and minorities from voting. It should not be controversial to say that no one who has argued for reviving racist Jim Crow laws belongs on the federal bench, let alone for a lifetime. Mr. Devine also referred to himself as, quote, a zealot, close quote, for the anti-choice movement. Now, whether you're pro-choice or pro-life, to think that someone is that blatant and open, declaring himself as a zealot on the issue, should trouble you. This has been on full display in his role as Missouri Solicitor General. Mr. Devine has challenged women's ability to access the abortion drug mifepristone and has undermined the decision of Missouri voters to codify abortion access in their state constitution. Previously, Mr. Devine wrote, and I quote him, because we know a genetically unique human comes into existence at fertilization, abortion should not be ethically permitted, close quote. I know that's the position of some voters that I represent and even some members of my family. I disagree. Taken at face value, this statement suggests that Mr. Devine opposes access to in vitro fertilization, IVF. Well, I have some beautiful grandkids who were the product of these IVF procedures. It was the only way that they could come to this earth, and thank God they did. To think that this man who's seeking this lifetime appointment to the bench would not even answer the question on IVF is troubling. Joshua Devine is too inexperienced to serve as a district court judge, and his radical views, I think, disqualify him. I'm also troubled by the nomination of Christian Stevens. Following his confirmation hearing, I asked Judge Stevens whether he denounced the January 6th insurrection on the Capitol. For those who don't remember, that was a time when a mob forced Congress to shut down the procedure of counting electoral votes in the 2020 election. As a result of that decision, they stormed the Capitol, came into this chamber, videotaped themselves aping by sitting in the chair of the presiding officer, going through the desks of senators, tearing up the place, and unfortunately attacking a lot of innocent people. I asked Christian Stevens about the January 6th insurrection. He said, the use of the word insurrection was a legal conclusion, and that it would be inappropriate for him to comment on it because it's a highly contested political issue. Here's the cold, hard truth. The violent mob that ransacked the Capitol complex in an attempted insurrection to stop the counting of the votes on that election led to the deaths of 5 police officers and injuries to more than 140 others. It triggered the largest prosecution in the history of the Department of Justice. Over 1,000 individuals were convicted and prosecuted for their activity that day. The fact is, this nominee couldn't acknowledge what happened that day and denounce the violence perpetrated against law enforcement is troubling. If you can't stand up for the men and women that keep us safe at this very moment in this building, who risk their lives for the members, their staff, and the visitors to the Capitol, you have no place in a lifetime position as a federal judge. I'm also concerned about a law review article Judge Christian Stevens wrote defending the infamous 100-to-1 sentencing disparity between crack cocaine and powder cocaine. I voted for it in the House of Representatives. Why? The idea was that the crack cocaine was such a deadly and threatening narcotic that we were going to pass a sentencing provision that was really tough. Well, this was tough. It said if you were convicted of possessing powder cocaine or an exact same amount of cocaine in crack form, crystal form, you would be receiving a sentence for the crack cocaine 100 times powder cocaine. What happened as a result of it? The result, I'm sorry to say, it didn't work. You'd think with that kind of sentencing hanging over you, people would think twice. It didn't work. As a result, more people were using crack cocaine after we passed the law, and the price on the street was going down instead of up. We filled federal prisons primarily with African Americans who had lengthy sentences, some of them over 20 years, for the simple sale of crack cocaine. We decided that was wrong. I led the effort here in the Senate side. I'm proud that I did. I was joined by Chuck Grassley, Republican of Iowa, and Mike Lee, Republican of Utah. We passed a bill called the First Step Act, and it was sent to President Trump, who signed it into law in his first term. Now comes Christian Stevens, Judge Stevens, wanting a seat on the federal bench. I'm concerned about a law review article he wrote defending the 100-to-1 disparity between crack cocaine and powder cocaine. He wrote, and I quote him, "There may be evidence to suggest these kinds of sentencing provisions are beneficial to black communities hardest hit by crack epidemic." I'm disappointed that Judge Stevens continues to stand by an article that defends the crack powder cocaine sentencing disparity. It was wrong then, it's wrong now. And he's certainly doing no one a favor by supporting that kind of penalty. My Republican colleagues will likely vote for both of these nominees I've described, Mr. Devine and Judge Stevens, on the federal bench without hesitation. But the American people deserve judges who will protect their basic fundamental rights, demonstrate independence and integrity, and remain faithful to the Constitution and rule of law. Neither of these nominees have proven that they embody these attributes. I will vote against both of these nominees, urge my colleagues to do the same. And Mr. President, I yield the floor.
President.
Senator from Texas.
Mr. President, I know I'm not the only one who feels like time flies, but it's hard for me to imagine it's only been 6 months since President Trump was sworn into office. 6 months. And when you look at what we've been able to accomplish together, the Republican majority in the House and the Senate and President Trump, it's been nothing short of amazing. We passed President Trump's one big beautiful bill and avoided a multi-trillion-dollar tax increase on the American people. We codified DOGE cuts through the rescissions package just last week. And we've continued to confirm President Trump's qualified nominees to the executive branch. These confirmation votes, of course, will continue apace, but as we're turning to the latter half of this first year in his second term of office, it's also time to focus on other work we need to do, like paying the bills, which is sort of the most fundamental responsibility of the Congress, and authorizing legislation to keep our country strong. Passing legislation like the National Defense Authorization Act. Mr. President, I have talked many times about my dad, who was a B-17 pilot in the Army Air Corps in World War II. He was a very young man when he flew 26 bombing missions over Nazi Germany, and unfortunately, he flew one too many because he was shot down and captured as a POW on his 26th. And he was a POW, a prisoner of war, for about the last 4 months of World War II. But I know my dad, who Tom Brokaw called part of the greatest generation, the people who fought and won a world war in World War II, they believed and they hoped and they prayed that that would be one of the last real threats of world war ever in our lifetime. But we are now living in what I consider to be the most dangerous time since World War II. In many ways, Vladimir Putin and his Russia have already declared war on the West, which is now raging in Ukraine. We know that Iran has been moving very deliberately toward a nuclear weapon, and thanks to President Trump's decisiveness, that has now been set back for an undetermined period of time. North Korea, which is developing ballistic missiles and threatening its neighbors in the East, in Asia, is now volunteering soldiers to fight with the Russians in Ukraine. And then there is China, which is determined to dominate the world stage economically and militarily. But our defense authorization bill, I believe, is one of the most important things we do here, because this is what allows all of the other freedoms that we enjoy in this country to flow from a strong America. Peace through strength, as Ronald Reagan called it, and something that President Trump has embraced as well. Peace through strength, because we know that weakness is a provocation. It's an enticement. It's an invitation to the world's authoritarians, bullies, and tyrants who are more than happy to fill the gap when America is not strong. So we need to take this matter very seriously of reauthorizing the National Defense Authorization. But one of the things that I'm going to be focusing on as part of this defense authorization bill is to finally address outbound investment in China. As we speak, U.S. companies are spending billions of dollars in China, investing in Chinese companies, particularly those involved in critical technologies like quantum computing and artificial intelligence. Because of China's military-civilian fusion, there is no such thing as a private sector and a public sector. Everything in China works toward the advancement not only of their economy, but of their military as well. We know these investments are not simply enriching China's economy and fueling advances in consumer technology. They are directly bolstering Chinese military strength. Now, I've been raising alarm bells for a number of years now and working toward a solution to this critical strategic concern for a long time, and I have something to announce to my colleagues here. I'm not going to give up. We're going to stay after this until we get it done right. 2 years ago, during the debate on the defense authorization bill, the Senate voted 91-6. This is a bipartisan concern, 91-6, to include my amendment, which contained provisions on outbound investment transparency. Even in the face of such overwhelming, nearly unanimous consensus, again, on a bipartisan basis in the Senate to address outbound investment, this provision was stripped from the final bill, presumably at the service of the powerful special interests who want to continue to profit while putting our national security interests at risk. Last year, provisions of outbound investment transparency were included in the initial text of the end-of-year funding package. Unfortunately, in the midst of negotiations, that provision once again ended up stripped from the bill. But again, I want to make it clear, I'm not willing to take no for an answer on something that is so critical to our national security. I will not quit. But the reality is our time is running out. President Xi, the dictator who runs China and the Chinese Communist Party, has instructed his army, the People's Liberation Army, to be ready by 2027 to reincorporate Taiwan, not 2 years from now. Now, there are many voices emphasizing the importance of increasing our defense spending, which I certainly agree with, to prepare for a China contingency, as it's sometimes called. And I don't disagree with those sentiments, because again, deterrence is the goal. We don't want to fight any wars. We don't have to. We want to prevent war by American strength. But what good does it do to continue to increase our defense spending if American investors are simultaneously making investments in China in what amounts to the arsenal of our #1 strategic adversary? As of 2023, the United States was investing close to $2 billion in Chinese critical technology sectors, including semiconductors, quantum computing, and artificial intelligence. These are American companies investing in China, helping them to advance these critical technologies, which we are competing with here in America. A report from the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission pointed out that the United States is the most important foreign source of investment to semiconductors, quantum computing, and artificial intelligence in China. The most important. Now, there's a lot of talk right now about maintaining our strategic edge in the artificial intelligence race. But the first step in any competition is to make sure you're not helping your competition, your opponent, your adversary. Every U.S. dollar invested in China's AI sector is a dollar that is directly undermining the goal of U.S. dominance when it comes to this critical technology. And once again, we have to keep in mind that in China, there is no neatly divided private and government sector division. All of this is in service of the Chinese Communist Party and their military. Chinese companies are required to work hand in glove with the Chinese Communist Party, which means that private sector technology advances and military advances are one and the same. Mr. President, the time has come to stop dawdling when it comes to the Chinese Communist Party. Our national security is far more important than American companies chasing riches in the Chinese market. I'm very grateful to President Trump for focusing our attention more acutely on China during his first term and now in his second term, especially with regard to both inbound, that's foreign direct investment in the United States, as well as outbound investment, which I'm addressing right now. Back in February this year, the White House announced an American First investment policy, which builds on the work that we partnered with President Trump during his first term to modernize the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, something known as CFIUS by its initials. The purpose was to ensure that we are not opening up ourselves in America to risks through inbound foreign direct investment. But that inbound foreign direct investment is only part of the story. We also have to address the lack of transparency and an outbound investment by American companies in China that are fueling the rise of the Chinese technological advances. I'm very grateful to Secretary Bessent of the Department of Treasury for his willingness to work with my office and colleagues here in the Senate on this topic. Earlier this year, I introduced the Foreign Investment Guardrails to help thwart China Act, or the Fight China Act, as it's called. This builds on earlier iterations of my legislative efforts to address outbound investment transparency. Secretary Bessent and his colleagues at the Treasury Department have been great allies and great partners in providing us with technical assistance on this legislation. But, Mr. President, time is a-wasting. Time is of the essence. Now is the time to recommit ourselves to treating this issue with the urgency that it deserves. The ugly truth is that without restricting outbound investment, we are funding the development of technologies and weapons that could one day be used to kill American soldiers. Our bill, after all, is mainly about understanding the nature of what those investments are. It's mainly about transparency, because we are flying blind as policymakers, really not knowing exactly how that money is being invested and how it's being used within China itself. My outbound investment transparency bill would address that, so we would be able to understand the nature of that threat and take actions that we deem appropriate in the national interest. So I would urge both our House and Senate colleagues to ensure that this year's National Defense Authorization Bill addresses this critical issue. It's time for Americans to stop investing in China's military. Mr. President, I yield the floor. And I know it's recorded.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsterbrooks.
Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
And I move to proceed to executive session to consider calendar number 259.
Questions on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The motion is agreed to. The clerk will report the nomination.
Nomination, the judiciary, Zachary M. Bluestone of Missouri to be United States District Judge for the Eastern District.
Mr. President, I send a cloture motion to the desk.
The clerk will report.
Cloture motion, we, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, do hereby move to bring to a close debate on the nomination of Zachary M. Bluestone of Missouri to be United States District Judge for the Eastern District of Missouri, signed by 17 senators as follows.
Mr. President, I ask consent to reading the names be waived.
Without objection.
And I move to proceed to legislative session.
The questions on the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to.
Mr. President, I move to proceed to executive session to consider calendar number 50.
The questions on the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. Clerk will report the nomination.
Nomination, Environmental Protection Agency, Aaron Zabo of Virginia to be an Assistant Administrator.
Mr. President, I send a cloture motion to the desk.
The clerk will report.
Cloture motion, we, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, do hereby move to bring to a closed debate on the nomination of Aaron Zabo of Virginia to be an Assistant Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, signed by 17 senators as follows.
Mr. President, I ask consent to read the names be waived.
Without objection.
And I move to proceed to legislative session.
Questions on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to.
Mr. President, I move to proceed to executive session and consider calendar number 131.
Questions on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. The clerk will report the nomination.
Nomination, Department of Defense, Matthew Lohmeyer of Arizona to be Undersecretary of the Air Force.
Mr. President, I send a cloture motion to the desk.
Clerk will report.
Cloture motion, we, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, do hereby move to bring to a closed debate on the nomination of Matthew Lohmeyer of Arizona to be Undersecretary of the Air Force, signed by 17 senators as follows.
Mr. President, I ask consent to reading the names be waived.
Without objection.
And I move to proceed to legislative session.
Questions on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. Motion is agreed to.
Mr. President, I move to proceed to executive session to consider calendar number 87.
Questions on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. The clerk will report the nomination.
Nomination, Department of Veterans Affairs, Richard Topping of Ohio to be Chief Financial Officer.
Mr. President, I send a cloture motion to the desk.
Clerk will report.
Cloture motion, we, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, do hereby move to bring to a closed debate on the nomination of Richard Topping of Ohio to be Chief Financial Officer, Department of Veterans Affairs, signed by 17 senators as follows.
Mr. President, I ask consent to reading the names be waived.
Without objection.
And I ask unanimous consent to resume calendar number 171.
Without objection. The clerk will report the nomination.
Nomination, Department of Justice, Terrance Cole of Virginia to be Administrator of Drug Enforcement.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks.
To recognize the senator from Idaho.
Mr. President, I ask that we unanimous consent that the quorum call be initiated.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to waive the mandatory quorum call with respect to the Cole nomination.
Without objection.
And, Mr. President, I have one request for a committee to meet during today's session of the Senate. It has the approval of the majority and minority leaders.
Duly noted.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent that we begin the previously scheduled roll call vote immediately.
Without objection. The clerk will report the motion to invoke cloture.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, do hereby move to bring to a close debate on the nomination of Terrance Cole of Virginia to be Administrator of Drug Enforcement, signed by 17 senators.
Under the previous order, the mandatory quorum call under Rule 22 has been waived. The question is it the sense of the Senate that the debate on the nomination of Terrance Cole of Virginia to be Administrator of Drug Enforcement shall be brought to a close? The yeas and nays are mandatory under the rule. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Also Brooks, Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Banks, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn, Mr. Blumenthal, Ms. Blunt Rochester, Mr. Booker, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Britt, Mr. Budd, Ms. Cantwell, Mrs. Capito, Mr. Cassidy, Ms. Collins, Mr. Coons, Mr. Cornyn, Ms. Cortez Masto, Mr. Cotton, Mr. Kramer, Mr. Crapo. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Curtis. Mr. Daines. Ms. Duckworth. Mr. Durbin. Ms. Ernst. Mr. Fetterman. Mrs. Fisher. Mr. Gallego. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mr. Graham. Mr. Grassley. Mr. Haggerty. Ms. Hassan. Mr. Hawley. Mr. Heinrich. Mr. Hickenlooper. Ms. Hirono. Mr. Hovind. Mr. Husted.
Yes.
Mrs. Hyde-Smith. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Justice. Mr. Kane. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kim, Mr. King, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Langford, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lummis, Mr. Markey, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Merkley, Mrs. Moody, Mr. Moran, Mr. Moreno, Mr. Mullen, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Ossoff, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Risch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Sheehy, Ms. Slotkin, Ms. Smith, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young. Senators voting in the affirmative: Bozeman, Capito, Crapo, Husted, Moran, Paul, Tuberville. Senators voting in the negative: Gallego, Sanders, and Slotkin. Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, aye. Mr. Kane. Mr. Kane, no. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bennett, no. Mrs. Fisher. Mrs. Fisher, aye. Ms. Ernst. Ms. Ernst, aye. Mr. Kim. Mr. Kim, no. Mr. Fetterman. Mr. Fetterman, no. Mr. Peters, Mr. Peters, no. Mr. Justice, Mr. Justice, aye. Mr. Lujan, Mr. Lujan, no. Mrs. Shaheen, Mrs. Shaheen, no. Mrs. Britt, aye. Mr. Kramer, aye. Mr. Johnson, aye. Ms. Lummis, aye. Mr. Heinrich, no. Mr. Blumenthal, no. Mr. Scott of Florida, aye. Mr. Marshall, aye. Mr. Reed, no. Ms. Collins, aye. Mr. Wicker, aye. Mr. Padilla, no. Mr. King, no. Mr. Haggerty, aye. Ms. Blunt Rochester, no. Mr. Rounds, aye. Mr. Curtis, aye. Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Van Hollen, no. Mrs. Moody, Mrs. Moody, aye. Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Ricketts, aye. Mr. Cotton, Mr. Cotton, aye. Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Barrasso, aye. Ms. Rosen, Ms. Rosen, no. Ms. Murkowski, Ms. Murkowski, aye. Ms. Hassan, Ms. Hassan, no. Mr. Merkley, Mr. Merkley, no. Mr. Grassley, Mr. Grassley, aye. Mrs. Blackburn, Mrs. Blackburn, aye. Ms. Cortez Masto, Ms. Cortez Masto, no. Mr. Daines, Mr. Daines, aye. Mr. Langford, Mr. Langford, aye. Mr. Wyden, Mr. Wyden, no. Mr. Cornyn, Mr. Cornyn, aye. Ms. Smith, Ms. Smith, no. Ms. Klobuchar. Ms. Klobuchar. No. Mr. Schmidt. Mr. Schmidt. Aye. Mr. Hoven. Mr. Hoven. Aye. Mr. Scott. Mr. Scott of South Carolina. Aye. Mr. Thune. Mr. Thune. Aye. Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee. Aye. Mr. Hickenlooper. Mr. Hickenlooper. No. Mr. Markey. Mr. Markey. No. Mr. McConnell. Mr. McConnell. Aye. Ms. Hirono. Ms. Hirono. No. Mr. Murphy. Mr. Murphy. No. Mr. Warner. Mr. Warner. No. Mr. McCormick. Mr. McCormick. Aye. Mr. Banks. Mr. Banks. Aye. Mr. Sheehy. Mr. Sheehy. Aye. Mr. Hawley. Mr. Hawley. Aye. Ms. Cantwell. Ms. Cantwell. No. Mr. Young. Mr. Young. Aye. Mr. Schiff. Mr. Schiff. No. Mr. Moreno. Mr. Moreno. Aye. Ms. Also Brooks. Ms. Also Brooks. No. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly. No. Mr. Welch. Mr. Welch. No. Ms. Baldwin. Ms. Baldwin. No. Ms. Warren. Ms. Warren, no. Mrs. Murray. Mrs. Murray, no. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Durbin, no. Mr. Schumer. Mr. Schumer, no. Mr. Booker. Mr. Booker, no. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mrs. Gillibrand, no. Mr. Schatz. Mr. Schatz, no. Mr. Whitehouse. Mr. Whitehouse, no.
On this vote, the yeas are 44, the nays are 43, and the motion is agreed to.
Did that look good? Did the quick look at it look good? Okay.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate resume legislative session and be in a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on the Judiciary be discharged from further consideration. The Senate now proceed to S-Res 276.
The clerk will report.
SRES 276, designating June 12, 2025 as Women Veterans Appreciation Day.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection, the committee is discharged and the Senate will proceed.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate now proceed to the en bloc consideration of the following resolutions, which are at the desk: S-Res 328, S-Res 329, S-Res 330.
Is there an objection to proceeding to the measures en bloc? Without objection, the Senate will proceed en bloc.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the resolutions be agreed to, the preambles be agreed to, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made, laid upon the table, all en bloc.
Without objection.
And I ask unanimous consent that the post-cloture time with respect to the Cole nomination be expired and the Senate vote on confirmation of the Cole nomination 11 a.m. Tuesday, July 22nd. Further, if confirmed, the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table, and the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it stand adjourned until 10 a.m. on Tuesday, July 22nd, that following the prayer and pledge, the journal proceedings be approved to date, the morning hour be deemed expired, the time for the two leaders be reserved for their use later in the day, morning business be closed, and the Senate resume consideration of the motion to proceed to calendar number 121, H.R. 3944. Further, notwithstanding Rule 22, the vote on the cloture motion with respect to the motion to proceed to calendar number 121, H.R. 3944, occurred at a time to be determined by the Majority Leader in consultation with the Democratic Leader.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, for the information, the Senate will have 3 votes starting at 11 a.m. tomorrow, confirmation of the Cole, Devine, and Stevens nominations. If there's no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that it stand adjourned under the previous order.
The Senate stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow.